Welcome to Oink Time with Ben Ellwood and Jen Carnovale. This episode is with Alice Fraser. We forgot to do an introduction. Take it away, Ben Ellwood.
But to me, it's a lot of the time the metaphor is a more potent thing than actually trying to articulate how you feel. Because how you feel in the face of grief or any kind of extreme emotion is so overwhelming and so... like it is otherworldly. It is mythological when you lose a parent or, whatever. It's beyond reckoning. So you have to kind of put it into a narrative. Yeah. Well, I do anyway. For me it works to,
Yeah, you feel it. You feel your brain kick into some different type. Well, the grief I've experienced, great and small, usually when it's huge, is I will feel certain things happen. And there's like a physical thing that happens. My hands will start tingling, which is really weird. Like I'll have like a pins and needles sensation in my hands. And then I will feel so calm. Yeah. And I'll be like, okay, I need to go and do this. And it's like very out of body. You're like, I'm cleaning dishes because I should, but I feel... like it's like this really creepy kind of...
There's this scene in the first episode of 6 Feet Under when the father dies, and there's a scene where the two kids go to the supermarket just shopping for watermelons. And I remember I saw that before anyone I knew died. And I remember watching that going like, as if that's how you're going to react when someone that you love has died, as if you wouldn't just be on the ground shrieking and screaming. And that's exactly what happens. It's just kind of, you just go into this chug-a-lug mode of...
Yeah, we went to the beach.
The day that happened?
Yeah, Mum died in the morning and it was a beautiful sunny day, and so we just, all of us, me and Dad and Henry, my twin brother, we were all there and we just went to the beach.
Yeah.
You just go on.
Yeah.
But I know what you mean about that calm, because I was with my gran when she died and Mum, freaked out and started screaming, and we were in the middle of the hospital and the ER nurses rushed in to revive her, and Mum kind of wanted to go in there, and I went into that real calm kind of, putting my hands on her shoulders, the whole time knowing, like, I've just watched my grandma die. She's gone. But yeah, this like crazy calm that you don't predict. Grief is so strange.
Yeah.
It's such a strange... Did you find that you were blindsided by it, months down the track?
It was weird because I always knew, because my mum was sick from when I was very young, I always knew that she was going to die. And I was surprised by how much of a surprise it was, the grief. Because I had my hand on her pulse. So after she stopped breathing, I could feel the last few heartbeats. And just kind of trying to, that's such an intangible, like it's such a tangible thing, but it's not something you can lock down. And just... I spent a lot of time sort of trying to remember certain things, which is sort of impossible to do, but trying to lock them in. I was surprised by it unlocked my anger.
Elaborate.
I've never been an angry person. Anger has never been an emotion that I've had easy access to. It's never. I will get upset before I get angry.
Does it make you feel uncomfortable?
Yeah, I'm very uncomfortable. I find it a deeply unpleasant physical sensation. And I know some people love it. I know some people are addicted to it.
You're talking to Ben.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Elephant in the room.
So for me, it was like the bucket of sadness was too full and it spilled over and opened up this whole thing of being able and suddenly getting angry about things that would ordinarily have been, that's annoying. I would feel this fury rising in me.
But do you think that was a substitute? No, you go.
No.
Do you think that was a substitute for feeling rage about, the perceived injustice of what had happened, and that's, unchangeable? So because I find my anger channels into things that I feel like I can change in lieu of the things that I can't, that I'm really angry about.
I think it was less that. I don't think it was less. I don't think it was so much a substitute as that. Here's a metaphor. That the other emotions were waterlogged. That they were already. They'd already been. They weren't available anymore because they were so full dealing with this other stuff. So joy wasn't a response. Sadness wasn't a response. Confusion wasn't a response. They were all busy somewhere in my hindbrain processing this. Yeah. So anger stepped up to the plate.
Anger woke up.
Yeah. It's like, well, I've got to have an emotion.
I need to feel something. You'll do.
Well, yeah, you're in a situation that requires an emotional response from you. and the only one that had any spare time on its hand was anger.
Did it shock you?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm very bad at being angry.
Yeah.
You'd think as somebody who doesn't get angry, you'd have a lot of control over your anger when it arrives, but you've got
no. You got no experience.
Yeah, you've got no experience.
But you were like, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, you don't know how to dial it or direct it or anything. It's just. Yeah.
See, I've got the opposite.
Why am I sweating?
I never feel more lucid than when I'm really fucking angry because it's a very comfortable place to be. And I would
It's
say,
your comfort
Wait,
zone.
have we started this podcast?
yeah, it started.
sorry.
Yeah, we started ages ago.
Just checking.
I don't call it anger. I call it righteous indignation,
That's
and that way it
true.
gives me this feeling of superiority. You know, it's like, oh, I'm railing against the system, and it's not that I'm emotionally stunted and that
Someone's
I don't.
wronged you, usually.
Well, yeah. Well, if I feel like an injustice, and then it's like this laser focus, and I'm never more articulate than when I'm telling off someone for eating loudly in the cinema. It's just it flows, you know. And I wish I had that
believe-
flow on stage or in
I've
life.
seen you work it to get to that stage because it's so much more comfortable for you.
The rage.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
I've seen you be comfortable, like how we are now, we're just sitting chatting, but something bothers you. And I can feel it. And I know in the next 20 minutes, something will make you reach that point because you'll be far more comfortable then. Like, it doesn't even have to be anything. And all of a sudden, it'll be like, that fucking... And I'm like, you're just looking for that. You're looking to feel enraged because it's so much more comfortable for you than just being...
Well, it's
indifferent, I guess?
There's a terrible curse in that, you know, I don't know what the ratio is. Say it's 50% of the time when I'm like, meh, 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 meh.
That's generous, but yeah.
Well, no, I'm saying 50% of the time it seems that the people that I'm with are minimally bemused, but maximally very amused by the display. And I feel like if I'd spent my entire adolescence, every time I started going, brah, 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 everyone was just like, whoa, dude, like, this makes me feel afraid or this makes me feel uncomfortable. I might have
Toned it down.
toned it the fuck down.
It
But
depends on if you're in control or not. Because I've told you to tone it down a few times.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, you can.
I can, yeah. Other people probably cannot.
Well, it depends. Again, it's like, you know, if it's coming from someone I trust, it's like, oh, thank you. I don't want to be that fucking dude.
I wonder how, like, I often wonder how much we get angry about things or how much we pick things to put our anger on because we're angry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
Or any feeling.
Of
Like you
course.
might be, you'll feel good or you'll feel bad or whatever it is. And it's confusing. Could be for any reason. And
Yeah.
you just sort of sort through your Rolodex and you're like, oh yeah, that's probably what I'm angry about.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah.
just,
And this person.
I've felt myself. So I was on the pill for years. I'd stopped the pill and then I went on like a weird, fun, emotional roller coaster. And I felt myself on days going, I feel irritated and I don't know why. And I was probably just hormonal. But I could feel myself going, oh, it's because of that. That's why I'm irritated. That is irritating me. I need that thing to be resolved. And then it would be resolved and I'd be like, oh, wasn't that? Oh, it's that. And then I was like looking for things to justify something that was just a hormonal thing that went in like a day. But I'd felt the feeling and then I was very clearly in my mind, I could see myself doing it, trying to place a reason as to why. And I was like, oh, this isn't great.
But
I
that's
need
so-
to go
that's
for a
normal.
run. Like,
Like-
I need to like shake
I
it
worked
off.
10 years in retail. Like, anyone that yells at a person standing behind a counter is very rarely yelling about, you know, the fact that they didn't get the right change. They're yelling because their life is or their day is shit and
Yeah.
this is a fucking soft target.
Yeah.
And it's just unleashed.
Yeah, it's the same as like heckling and all that
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
stuff.
But I mean, I know when I like snap at someone, like, you know, whatever, say someone's talking loudly in the movie, it's not just that they're talking loudly in the movie, it's that they are the indicative of a wider cultural decline and the savagery of our times and that people can't even watch a movie without ruining it for everyone. And it becomes this like
They
epic
become the
quest.
face.
everyone's a proxy for something else
Yeah,
in
exactly.
that world. And I think that's one of the interesting things, particularly about online hate,
Yeah.
which I'm very lucky to not get a lot of. And I think it's mainly because I'm not easy to use as a proxy for someone else. I'm not easy to use as a representation for the girl that bullied you in high school
Yeah,
or
yeah.
every your ex-wife or whatever it
can't
happens
place
to
you.
be. And that's something that I've fought for stupidly. It's bad for my career to refuse to be a thing that is easily boxed in.
But is it also just more natural for you to be as you are? Like, are you fighting a part of you because you're worried you'll be boxed in?
Yeah, I don't know. I've always felt uncomfortable with people knowing what I am. Or thinking they know what I am. I have this compulsion to complicate.
Can I just say I love that because people walk out of your shows and they're like, Alice is my best friend. Like they are like, I know Alice Fraser. Like we are tight. Like so, I find this so interesting.
No, but that's because you are very generous in sharing so much of your experience.
See, this is interesting. Sorry.
For example, I think of myself as an open book with sealed sections.
Okay.
There are things that I will not talk about on stage. And partly artistically, partly personal choice, and as a result, I talk about things that other people don't, which can make it seem like I'm more open than I am. And because again, I have this compulsion to complicate. On the other hand, this. On the other hand, that. But what about this? What about that? What about my position in this? And to question and disrupt all of that. That is honest, and I think people like that. That comes across as honest. But what it means is when someone goes, "What do you like? What's she like? How do you define her?"
Yeah, put her into one line.
Yeah, I have never wanted to be able to be summed up in one line.
No, but that's great because it's just like, well, you're just Alice.
Yeah, that's what I want to be. Like, I don't want any. What kind of comedy do you do? I want it to be Alice Fraser style comedy. That's what I want.
Yeah, you don't want it to
definitely.
be. She's sassy and she's cutesy. But
it's like, I mean,
I can understand not wanting those things at all attached to you.
But it can be sort of really juvenile. I'm talking about it in my show this year. Of like, I don't wear pink. I refuse to wear pink, despite the fact that I quite like pink as a colour and it really suits me. But just because I was the girl twin and Henry was the boy twin, and I rejected.
Oh my God! There's a photo of you and your brother in pink and blue, and I remember someone making a comment on it and being like, Alice, why are you in pink and your brother's in blue? It's just built in from that age.
Yeah, no, that was probably a coincidence because we shared clothes for the most part, but yes, I just have always felt really uncomfortable with someone knowing, like, again, I'm going to quote from my show this year because I think it's a good example, and it's really unpleasant when you've figured something out in your head and then put it in a joke and you can't figure out another way to say it because that's the best way to say it. But I was in London, a guy was selling steaks out of a women's handbag.
Awesome.
Cooked or raw?
Raw. M&S. No, they were like M&S packaged steaks. He'd clearly nicked them, and he was selling them out of this women's handbag to women on the bus. And mainly older women, mainly ethnic older women. He's going up and down. This lady was like, oh, what kind of steaks? He's like, really high-quality sirloin steaks from M&S. Why aren't you eating them? I'm a vegetarian. It was a fascinating montage of human behaviour. But he didn't try to sell me a handbag steak.
Right.
And I wouldn't have bought one, but I didn't know that I didn't like that he knew that I wouldn't buy one. Like, it's that level. It's quite juvenile in some ways.
So Alice bought 4 steaks.
Just to prove him wrong.
Come here.
But like, do you find it's an effort to like? Are you actively suppressing parts of your personality when you're talking to people, or is it just something that naturally, like, do you think it's a defensive mechanism, or it's just is it a power thing? Because it's actually quite. It's a social advantage for people not to know everything about you.
Yeah, it's a career disadvantage probably to not be able to be summed up easily and not be able to be sold easily. But it is, it's not fake. But it is compulsive. I don't like being put in a box. And maybe that's, something as dumb as being bullied at school. People telling you who you are. Yeah. I don't like people telling me who I am. And if they think they know, if they think they're... But at the same time, when you have a friend or someone who's close to you and they know something about you almost that you don't, that's beautiful and thrilling. And I really like that feeling. If they say, oh, you're like this, and you go, oh, fuck, I am.
I do too. I love that. Because I don't know how to place myself. So if someone who's close and knows you like better than you know yourself says something like that, it's really fun.
Yeah, it makes you feel seen and known. But at the same time, if it's just like, oh, you're a feminist, I go, well, like, I can't, I don't like that. There's a Paul Graham article that I've mentioned before called "Hold Your Identity Loosely." So it's about these identities that we all have. We all have these series of overlapping identities. But if you say, I am a feminist or I am a vegetarian, then if someone attacks that idea framework, you take it personally and it's a personal attack. Whereas if you say, I very rarely eat meat, then you can have a conversation with someone about it.
Yeah, you can open a door.
You can talk, and I think that's what I like. I like the most.
And their opinion is an affront to your entire life philosophy.
Yeah, and so you can go, well, I can see where you're coming from. I don't understand why people are so, like, furiously unwilling to cede any ground to their opposition in an argument nowadays.
This is the style of the day now.
It doesn't weaken you.
No, not at all.
horrible.
In fact, it's conversely the kind of digging your heels in and being staunchly red in the face screaming does weaken your position, because it's like, well, if you have that much conviction in what you believe, surely one person out of 7 billion disagreeing with you is not going to destabilize you so dramatically.
Well, and it leads to these kind of boxes lead to very uneasy bedfellows, I think, ideologically speaking. So, for example, why are there not more vegan pro-lifers? What is it about your ideology that's important to you? Like, what are the parts of it? And you can't deal with that unless you acknowledge it as something that you hold rather than something that you are.
Yeah.
This is a set of things I believe, and then you can take them apart and look at where they're consistent or inconsistent. Is it that you believe all life is sacred and that the life of a guinea pig is as valuable as the life of a human being, in which case where does a fetus fall on that spectrum? That's a conversation you can have.
Yeah.
But if somebody's got a whole identity frame that's I'm this kind of lefty, you can't knock that down. You can't take it apart. You can't have an interesting conversation and find out what someone...
Well, even the language of I believe in whatever is more open than I am. As soon as you're saying I am, of course it's personal, and of course it's an attack, and of course it's something that people are going to be staunch and, like you said, dig their heels in. But I hate it. I find at the moment in particular,
Here we go.
well, I've been attacked for being called everything. It's hilarious.
Well, you're an anti-feminist
I'm an
traitor, aren't you?
feminist who's a traitor, who's a...
Okay, where are you anti-feminist?
Because she's not offended by the word bitch, so she's a bad feminist.
Someone used the word bitch once in a work shop environment and said, is that too derogatory to women, when the whole point of the joke, which wasn't even that great, was basically the guy making fun of himself. And I said, well, he used the words, is it triggering to the women here? And I said, no, it is not triggering to me at all. And everybody else was like, it's incredibly triggering. You shouldn't be using that language. It's really, and sort of went on this whole thing about how it's related to feminism and everything else. And I found that a bit infuriating.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everyone else has been attacked on either side of things as well, but I just don't like being told that I need to label myself either. And what you were saying, Alice, really is makes so much sense and resonates so much with me. You have no idea. I was at a pub and everyone had been drinking all day, and I said in passing to a friend, well, I feel so conservative about that now.
Yeah.
Someone didn't know what that was in reference to. They just heard me say that and leant over and said, you're a conservative.
Yeah.
You're a conservative. I said something happened and it made me feel conservative about something else, but that was it. That was it. It was like, you're a conservative. And I was like, well, I'm actually just a human who...
When did it switch from people are people to people are...
Their label.
It's only been a few years, but it's like it's become so radicalized and it's happened so fast that people get trapped in these ideological paradoxes where they'll make a statement that is completely incongruent with the next statement they made, but they can't square the two. And it's almost like watching their brain try to kind of mash the two thoughts together. It's very, I feel like our generation might have skipped it a little bit. It seems to mainly be affecting people that are 10 years younger than us, but it is very kind of it's a constant bad faith interpretation of every single statement. It is the worst possible interpretation of what was said, and you are now labeled, anti-feminist or
just
a
the
traitor or whatever it is. It's exhausting.
Really irks me because I just feel like humans are so complex, and labeling is just a really quick way to be divisive.
Well,
and
also,
to say, okay, we're not on the same team.
So I feel like it diminishes individual humanity.
Yeah, experience.
Because this one thing of saying, I know what you are. So there's a couple of different things that are sort of run parallel with this. One of which is the idea that no human can truly understand another person's experience, that you can't walk a mile in someone else's shoes, that it's impossible to do that. And that has some validity, but I don't think is useful. It's not useful to say, you can never understand me, so I must be the ultimate authority, in part because, for example, if you are a PTSD survivor, if you have post-traumatic stress disorder, one of the symptoms of that genuine mental state or illness is that you see things that are not threats as threats. That's the definition of being triggered, is that thing which is not a threat puts you back psychologically in the moment where you were under real threat and you have the physiological reaction as though it were a genuine threat. How is that the thing that makes you the best judge of whether something should be acceptable in society or not?
My skewed perspective on reality gives me ultimate authority.
I mean, but by definition, that is sort of a not a sensical thing to say. It's one thing to say, oh, hey, this is going to make me feel terrible as a person, as an individual, and can you take that into consideration? That's a perfectly reasonable thing to say. But to not acknowledge that you're atypical. And then the second thing is that two different people can have I have a twin brother, two different people can have the exact same upbringing, the exact same set of experiences, have the exact same, I mean, obviously he's a brother, so he's got male privilege and all that, but if he were a twin sister, even so, we would be very different people.
Of course.
So who are you to say that these things which may have an influence on your upbringing and the way that you are perceived in society and hierarchies, that they put you in a group any more than anything else does?
Yeah.
You might have some similarities, but the way that you react, again, like rape, for some people I know that has been the worst thing that's ever happened to them in their lives. It's been life-destroying. For other people, it's like a sprained ankle. For a little while it's sore and it's unpleasant. It might always be a little bit wobbly when they go for a run. But it's not the worst thing. So how can you say anything on behalf of this whole group of people based on?
No, of course. All you can ever speak for is yourself. And I think that's the thing that's very strange to me now. I understand people's need to box other people in, to label, you're this kind of person and you're that kind of person. What I can't understand now is the desire of the individual to label themselves as a thing, as though they don't understand that they are multifaceted and very complicated and multiple things all at once. We all have controlled schizophrenia to a degree. We're all very...
Because they feel like they belong. Because it's the quickest way to be part of a club, isn't it? It's the quickest way to be like, we're together and you're not.
But also it concretizes hierarchies that may exist. Like, for example, a racial hierarchy has traditionally been imposed, right? But to say that historical trauma means that forever going forward, you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
If you insist on your status as being below someone else, it sticks it there.
Of course.
And so, for example, the whole white men are the problem. That's not true. It's
a bold thing to say in 2019.
But
you know what I
agree,
mean? White men have been...
That is now a very bold statement.
Yeah, this is the thing, that people are the problem.
Yes.
White men have traditionally had power through a number of different things. Physical strength, which led them to a dominance in society, which meant they had more time to do refined intellectual thinking while women were doing grunt work to keep everyone's head above water, physical thing. Then they smashed the Middle East during the Crusades, and that, which was the leading civilization in the world, fell behind technologically speaking. So you have this white male dominance.
Yep.
But to say white men are the problem is... And when they were at the top, there's one more thing that I need to say. When they were at the top, of course, they develop narratives, again, with I feel this emotion, why? I'm at the top, why? It must be because I'm better, right? I'm different, I'm special, I'm better. But to say white men is the problem is not addressing the central lie. You're not different. You're not special. You're just people.
Yeah.
Power is the problem.
Yeah.
We need to think about responsible ways of dealing with power. If we are going to disrupt traditional hierarchies and put other people in power, you have to address the problem, the central problem. I'm not fucking happy that there's a woman that is the CEO of Yahoo. You know, I don't. The fact that she's a woman doesn't help.
Yeah.
I guess sorry, I'll just say one thing and then I think and I don't know if this is as problematic, but I think victimhood has never been more in for people who
it is a personality trait to be
necessarily-
broken and ruined and weak, and it's like
and fighting an uphill battle. Ben and I have talked about it a lot, probably too much on this podcast. Sean will tell me later.
Yeah.
But the whole thing of when I was younger, it was like, ignore what they've said about you or don't worry about what they've said about you. And now
obsess over it.
the emphasis is they said that about me. They are this and I am this and I am always fighting for this.
Yeah.
I like... Anyway, you say what you're going to say, and then I'm going to decide if I want to share something else.
I wonder. It seems to be that we're in this realm at the moment where we pathologize someone's pain and we turn it into from kind of run-of-the-mill ordinary pain. And I'm not talking about extreme awful things like genocide and rape. I'm just talking about the pain of being alive and a sentient human on Earth. It hurts, and you're gonna be triggered and you're going to be in situations that are deeply upsetting. And I feel like now with this emphasis on like, how do you feel? How did that make you feel? It promotes this idea of just rolling around in your own misery. When I was growing up, my grandmother was, you know, the golden light of the universe, like the most beautiful, you know, like if Walt Disney drew a grandmother, she was that grandmother, like just fucking gorgeous. But if I was wallowing in my own shit, she would indulge it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then it was get up.
Yeah.
Well,
let's go.
My mum had hyperacute reactions to sound. So if we were crying, she would say, stop crying and tell me what's wrong.
Yeah.
So you had to kind of be able to put aside your emotion to a certain extent in order to be able to communicate. I'll give an example. This is slightly talking out of school, so I'll anonymize it somewhat. A friend of mine was running a show, and it was a comedy show with a particular frame. It's quite a structured show. And as it was around the time that the Cardinal Pell stuff was coming up and this terrible abuse scandal in the church. And the show was wrapping up, and one of the acts on the show said, I have something to say on this subject. And it was 2 minutes before the end. And
one of the acts on
one
this,
of the acts,
so it was like a showcase.
So turned to him and said, I have something to say on this subject. And he said, okay, there's 2 minutes left of the show. Do a tight 5. Can you do 5 minutes on this? And the person who had this thing to say spoke for more than 20 minutes.
Wow.
And not comedy, not on the theme, just a genuine... Some people left because they had also experienced things that was not what they'd signed up for. And so and at the end of that, the person who'd done this very long and heartfelt, emotional thing at the end of the show went to my friend who was running the show and said, was that okay? And my friend said, not really.
Yeah.
And became, in that moment, the oppressor.
Of course. How dare you silence me?
Yeah. So that's, I think, a super interesting dynamic because without minimizing anyone's pain, that pain was being used in that interaction as a power.
Fuck yes. Fuck yes.
But that's what keeps happening. Like, I'm trying to think of ways to discuss things without being too revealing. What were you going to say, Ben?
Well, I mean, I saw this one night at a comedy night. There was this very, very drunk lady just ruining the fucking show. You know, and it's not a male-female thing. It's a human thing. Some people come to a fucking comedy show and they cannot stand that it's not about them. And so they have to fucking cluck the whole way through the show. And the promoter, the room runner, went over to her and was like, hey, like, you need to stop or you need to leave. And this woman at the top of her voice starts screaming that he is a misogynist who's trying to silence her. And it's like, it's got nothing to do with gender or sex. You are ruining the show and now you are weaponizing, you know, very real oppression that does exist, but not in this fucking context. Just because oppression has existed for thousands of years doesn't give you then carte blanche to go through life just elbowing people in the face. Like, you've got to fucking...
Yeah, how fragile is your sense of this oppression that you can't bear to have it questioned as well?
Well, exactly. And yeah, it goes back to that thing we were saying before, like, exactly, how staunch are you in your opinion? But it's just this, this is a perversion of this pain. You are not actually legitimately arguing a point. You are using other people's suffering as a get out of jail free card to just act like a fucking cunt, and it's not cool, man.
Well, and also, where's the hormetic effect or respect for the hormetic effect?
What's the hormetic effect?
The hormetic effect is when you work out, you break down muscle fibers and they grow back stronger.
Right.
And that was, there's a vast difference between telling someone who's broken their arm to suck it up and toughen up and telling somebody when they sore after doing pull-ups that, just work through it, work through the pain. We need to have kind of a human sense of what that is.
Like an emotional hormetics.
Yeah, but that is one of the reasons. I mean, the vast increase in self-harm and suicide among young teenage girls now, I think, and is a clear example that we're doing something wrong with our children. And young men as well, increasingly having mental illness issues. There is something wrong, and many, many things probably feed into it. Everything's more complicated than you think. But one thing I think is sheltering your children from normal, uncomfortable, unpleasant experiences that are nonetheless incredibly useful and powerful and make you a stronger, better person.
Well, there's basically this paradigm now that you are somehow entitled to live your entire, whatever it is, 75 years in complete, a complete bubble where you never once are made uncomfortable and you never once hear a word that upsets you. And it's just, it goes back to that thing I was saying. I think it just pathologizes these issues. It turns it into a much bigger deal than you see it when a kid falls over. They teeter between crying and not crying. And if the adult goes, oh my God, the kid bursts into tears, and that's the next fucking half an hour. Well, so if you just say, get up, let's go, you're all right, they're usually fine.
You're okay, you're stronger than whatever.
So then you also have this odd sort of, double standard maybe when it comes to your 6-followered bot who says something horrendous online, and then somebody who is on the moral self-justification train will give that original nothing huge airtime, thereby, ostensibly shutting this person down, but actually giving that horrible, hurtful statement, whatever it was at first, giving it millions of followers and much more exposure. Where does that fit? How responsible are you? There's a difference between, oh, hey, these guys are going to beat you up behind the bike shed, and, hey, Jen, did you hear what they were saying about you? There is a massive difference.
Yeah.
And no one seems to be taking or having a sense of responsibility or autonomy or self-respect about that.
Or just being able to go, oh, yeah, that guy fucking said a shit thing and, it made me feel bad, but today's the new day and let's just get on with it. And it's...
your type murders my type, or that hurt my feelings, it made me feel like shit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's always like... And that's the other thing. It whitewashes... There are gradients of abuse and there are gradients of cruelty. There just are. And, but now it's like to even say that is terrible. Yeah, it's a crime. Calling someone a bitch is not the same as, beating someone up.
No.
They're two very different things. Yes, it is a violent word said aggressively, and it can be very hurtful.
But not if it's in the context of...
Not if it's exactly.
See, that's what I mean. It's like that's all subtlety, I feel like, is lost.
Yeah, and there is a difference. There is a difference between the ways in which people interact as well. That there are gradients of abuse from the side of the abuser, and there are gradients of damage from the side of the receiver. We are people. Like we are... Something could hurt you that won't hurt me. Something could hurt me one day that wouldn't hurt me tomorrow.
Exactly. So that sentence, something could hurt me today that wouldn't hurt me tomorrow.
Yeah.
I feel like that needs to be plastered on everyone. Because the whole thing, I agree. The whole thing of, to suggest we agree that this is upsetting, so we're feminists and you're not. Or we agree, saying that you have, what did Oh, I don't know if I should discuss
No,
that.
say it.
No. It was about being told you had male privilege.
Oh, because I can get cheap haircuts. Look at my male privilege. It's really good, right? So privileged.
He's pointing to his balding
Bald
hair.
Head. Balding. Thank you so much, Alice.
still-
My balding
You've
head.
still got this. Look, you're not completely bald unless you're completely bald. You've
Fair
still
enough,
got enough for a really denialful.
I could do one of
comb-over.
those awesome three-way Trump comb overs.
Yeah.
Glass half full, Ben. Glass half full.
So here's my thing. I have a friend who has suffered from a lot of violence in their life, his life. He is a male and he's been the victim of violence and been in violent places. He was in an elevator, enclosed space with a man in a suit. The man in the suit shot his cuff, which is, very rapidly sticking your arm out to adjust the cuff of your suit. Right? My friend reacted in his body in that moment with shock, unpleasantness, full
Fight or
body, hair up on the back of your neck, deep hot flush of fear.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him about that, and he was saying, I am the atypical one in that circumstance, and I don't know this man, he doesn't know me. As a friend, if we were friends, I might go, oh man, if you're around me, don't make sudden movements. And as a friend, but he can't then walk through the world and demand that everybody, knowing that there is maybe one person in 30 or one person in 100 who will have this reaction. You can't demand that nobody ever adjusts their suit in.
But beyond that, it's almost this demand to psychically intuit what each individual's trigger words and trigger actions are. Know that by looking at the person and then behave accordingly.
And also on a real,
Which realistically,
this is that was going to be my point. People are triggered by smell. I am.
Anything, colour, any word. People assume, they're triggered because you've said, whatever swear word.
Yeah.
It very rarely would be a swear word that would trigger someone. It could be, calling someone, I don't know, whatever. Chickadee. But seriously, anything. It could be the smell of beer or the sound of the can. Or I have
for a year I couldn't listen to music because it'd make me cry.
Yeah. Okay.
Ban music.
Yeah.
Ban Mother's Day. You don't have a mother. Sunday must have been really hard for you. We need to ban Mother's Day.
Well, it was mildly hard, and what I did was not go on Twitter that day.
Of course,
because you don't need to see it.
But that's the thing. It's like, to what end does all this lead? Do we ban music because it's offensive to deaf people?
I think there's something about taking ownership. Alice, you saying how you didn't go on Twitter for the day. So something that really triggers me and I can't really handle is when a male close to me is pacing. I get really scared just because of things that have happened to me in the past.
Yeah.
And I've articulated that to Ben because Ben is my dear friend, and to my partner, to Chris, and to anyone I've dated before or been around. I've said, I know you're upset. I know you're really angry with me, but you pacing like this is making me feel like I'm either going to cry or have my heart's going to fall out of my chest.
Yeah.
So could you stop?
Yeah.
And then they have, and it's great. If a random person is pacing near me in a library, I would move away because the situation for me, it's way more absurd to walk up to someone and say, hi, sorry, you don't know me, but you're pacing and it's making me feel like I'm going to cry. So if you could stop, that would be great. That's way harder to get away with than go, you said bitch and now I'm triggered. Well, it's so much more complicated.
Yeah, there is another layer of, I think, something that is being missed, and it goes to the concretizing of hierarchies thing before, of if you have a friend of a minority group, and you see this a lot, you might call each other derogatory names for fun.
Of course.
And the reason that doesn't hurt, if it doesn't hurt, it often doesn't. Someone can call you a fat bitch, but they're your best friend and have been since you were 3 and you know each other.
The things Ben has called me are heinous.
Oh, please. Both ways, thanks.
Which is well, so for example, I don't know Ben as well as you do. You could happily call him bald and it would make him laugh, and it might not if I did it. And I don't know him well enough to know that yet.
I'd laugh.
For example, you know what I mean.
I trust you. No, I know what you mean. Absolutely.
As a thing.
It has to be earned.
Right, but the problem, when you are equals, when you're friends, it doesn't hurt because it's not diminishing them. Most times a bad word, a slur, is just a reminder to the person hearing the slur that in society they get treated worse, right? So someone on the bus goes, ugh, look at that bald man, it's gross.
Of course.
That would hurt you.
Absolutely.
because you're being reminded that bald men are seen as less than
Absolutely.
in society. That, if you go on Tinder, you'll see someone's profile going, oh, no baldies, no shorties, whatever. And that is hurtful to you.
Yep.
We need a society where everyone can use the N-word because it's not a reminder that there's an inequality. It's like trying to pull up a bloody tree by the twigs to focus on the term.
Absolutely.
Rather than the underlying trunk of the problem. It's
Absolutely.
like your legs are on fire and you're complaining about the smell. It's not that the smell isn't a symptom of the underlying problem.
But context and tone and intention does not exist anymore, and it's the most juvenile interpretation of these things, that it's the word in of itself that is the thing. No, it's not. The word in of itself means nothing. It's just a garbled group of phonetics that has no inherent meaning. You have to apply a meaning to it.
Wog in Australia.
Yeah, exactly.
Wog is a mildly derogatory term.
I got called a wog when I was young.
Yeah, right.
It was very derogatory when my mum was in
It was
school.
derogatory
It was
to my
like, it was like the N-word. Like, you fucking wog.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's been reclaimed and it's...
But in the UK, it's short for gollywog.
Yeah.
And it is the N-word.
Yeah.
So it goes from being like an elbow in the ribs word to a stabbing word. And that is a geographical... The word itself has nothing to do with that.
Cholera jasna is the worst word you could say in Polish. I could say that to a kid and not feel guilt or any kind of...
Yeah, because I don't know what you're saying.
Because it's just a sound.
empty
It doesn't mean
sounds,
anything.
yeah.
But if I said that to a Pole, geez, that's awful.
It's the reminder part of it that's the problem.
Do you think that the focus on all of these, trying to solve these issues in this kind of ham-fisted way is
Ben is miming typing.
is a response to the fact that there are problems in the world and the society at the moment that seem so insurmountable and so suffocating. The environment, politics, the rise of the fascist right, there's real Nazis that feel very emboldened and empowered, and it's just easier to go, I feel upset because, you
Or even
said...
a simpler version, Sydney's expensive.
Yeah,
It doesn't
right,
even
yeah.
have to be that big.
Yeah.
I think it can be, your relationship fell apart, you have no money, whatever. 4 things went wrong. And then you're looking for something that you can
Well, to return to the
stick
beginning
to.
of the conversation in terms of you're feeling a terrible thing inside you and you can't articulate it, and then you go, it's that thing. That's the thing that's making me anxious. That's the thing that's making me feel
that's the
oppressed.
problem.
That's the thing that's making me feel like I can't get the job I want. I can't have the life I want, while seeing everyone else's lives on social media looking glamorous.
Yeah.
And then there's also the fact that we are living in words online. So
Yes.
it feels like taking action
Yes.
to have a battle of words or to deal with something in words.
Yep.
And that lets off the valve of your discontent. So rather than storming the Houses of Parliament, you have a Twitter battle.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. But I also think it's interesting what you say about
Twitter
words. That's what I think. I think what's happened is, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a very small percentage of human interaction that is the words. The vast majority of it is eye contact
Body
and
language,
micro expressions and hand gestures and all these things that have evolved over many millions of years to get us to a place where we can have very nuanced conversations. When you remove all of that in your online communication and all you are left with is the words, maybe that's why the younger, I sound like such an old fart, but whatever, people in their 20s who have grown, digital natives who have grown up online are, all they have is the word. So that word means that thing. There can be no multiple meaning to the word because that's the meaning of that
Possibly.
word.
Which is also there is this problem now where in between us, I can say whatever it is and I can moderate the thing that I'm saying with my facial expression. I can say you're an idiot in a way that means I love you, and that is clearly communicated. There is no room for misinterpretation, but somebody takes that clip and puts it in the world. You can no longer ever really be sure that you're speaking to one person.
Yeah.
No.
Because any sentence you say can be to the whole world.
Yeah.
And I mean, you see that with that, obviously that Louis C.K. bit that was leaked, which, this is not, it doesn't count as a condoning of Louis C.K., so don't worry. But that thing of he thinks he's doing a trial show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the room, it seemed to be working. From the perspective of the person on stage, he's getting laughs. he did not think that he was speaking to the whole world and failing his responsibility to make a public statement on returning to the stage. For all we know, he could have done 5 trial gigs before then, done an abject apology in the first 2, then been like, that's out of the way. I'm going to talk about the terrible shootings in the school, and I'm going to figure out what's funny about that in front of this trial show that everyone in the room clearly understands. I'm just figuring it out. We don't know that. We only know this,
hot take.
The soundbite,
this thing that he came back to the stage and didn't address his wrongs and
Then made fun of dead kids.
Which may or may not have been true, but I wouldn't know whether it was true or not because I wasn't in the room. I don't know what face he was making. I don't know what had come before in the evening. I don't know whether he'd got up off mic before I just don't know.
It's also very strange with him. It's like, let's not pretend
he could have been wearing a T-shirt saying, I'm so desperately sorry for sexually assaulting. Like, you know what I mean? With like scrolling text, just naming the charities he's giving to. Like, we don't know. We don't ask. I mean, I assume he didn't, but
most people didn't even read the clip. They read the one, sentence extract in the article on Jezebel. I'm like, I can't believe he said that. And it's like, well, first of all, again, yes, it's out of context. But second of all, let's not pretend that Louis C.K.'s entire career hasn't been saying things that are like, I can't believe you said that. It's only now that in this new context that you're outraged. But before that, you were fucking laughing it up, thinking that he was the biggest genius on earth. So why are you now surprised?
I feel so. I mean, this is going to be, again, you can take this out of context if you want. But I feel sorry for sexual predators in these industries because they're the first generation that's been held to account for it. Like, I mean, obviously it's incredibly wrong and no one should have, and everybody should know not to do that. But they've got previous, like they've got hundreds of years of going, obviously this is wrong, but clearly I can get away with it. You don't have to be very evil to have fallen for that. They didn't. I do feel sorry for them. Like, I don't. I don't condone it. But I'm like, you're the guys who took the bullet for.
I think he's
all the others.
I think he's just a weak, sad man. Like, absolutely. I think, obviously what he did was gross and. If it fucked people up, that's fucking awful. But it ain't on the level of a Cosby or a fucking, God forbid, Jimmy Savile or someone like that guy is history's greatest monster. And he's, unequivocally, like, just pure fucking evil.
Well, there's a problem with comedy particularly where you are on stage, you're the underdog, right? You are. That's your experience. You do comedy because you're not the jock at school. You're not the successful person. And it's very hard to admit to yourself that you are in power. Because your whole career, your whole stage persona, your whole understanding of yourself is that you're a weird, gross dude. And that you can't think of yourself as a threat. And it's a hard thing to admit. It's for anyone. It's a hard thing for anyone to admit that they are a threat. To anyone.
No,
It's heartbreaking the first time you realize that someone is scared of you.
That occurred to me in, I think, year 12 or something. I suddenly was told that I was very scary. And that was like, I could not compute that fact because in my mind's eye, I was 5'6", morbidly obese, and just riddled with just intense self-loathing and self-hate. And of course that was manifesting as a cornered animal that was snapping the fingers off anyone that came near me. And so but externally that came across as like, oh no, you've got a really acerbic fucking tongue. And when you start yelling at someone, that's my fucking trick. Just find your weakest point and just start fucking hammering you.
And from your perspective, say a beautiful blonde girl comes by and raises her lip at you in a sneery way. You attack her. But from her perspective, you're a fucking big dude coming at her with a volume switch on.
And it's just like, but to be informed that from someone external to me of like, oh no, you're actually really scary when you behave like that. Thank God someone said that. And, I've been, through my life trying to kind of curb that kind of stuff. But I know what you mean. If you see yourself as scum, you cannot.
Yeah, or just the other.
The other,
It's hard. And I think this is one of the problems, again, for as people who are kind of traditionally oppressed get more power, which we all hope that we do and they do and all of the people who have suffered for things that are not their choice do, to realise and acknowledge your power as you get it and when you have it and when you don't. Be aware of that. Don't just use a bloody catch-all.
That's what I hope that if there is a shifting power dynamic, and there should be, it should at least be more kind of spread out amongst, different demographics and not necessarily just one. But I hope that there is a redefining of what it means to be in power, and it's not just a facsimile of how power has been wielded in the past.
Yeah. And of course, language is powerful, stories are powerful, ideas are powerful. All of these things can really be damaging and really be hurtful and propagandize people into deep inhumanity. I mean, you only have to look at the Holocaust to know that normal people can be talked into dehumanizing other people.
Yep.
But I think that's an argument for personal, questioning when you believe something too hard rather than the opposite.
But there doesn't seem to be a lot of courage to stand up again. I mean, I find that. I've been barely gigging lately, and if I'm honest with myself, I think a lot of it is to do with fear of being on stage and saying the wrong thing and having it being taken out of context and my life potentially being dismantled. Me and Jen have this conversation every week with the podcast. I sit there and listen back to it and cherry pick 3-second clips that I pull out, lest it, and it's a fool's errand because anything could be, if someone's determined enough, they can take anything you say out of context.
Yep.
Apologizing for Louis C.K., for instance.
Yeah, well, no, I do that on purpose. This is again my compulsion is to, of course I'm on the left, of course I'm on the side of women, of course I'm on the side of victims, but also you can be a cunt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having been hurt in the past doesn't obviate you the necessity for being a human being. You don't get to. And then the other thing is you're setting up precedents. There's this idea of legal precedent, right? If you can set up a benevolent dictatorship and with the best person in the whole world, Superman, moral, kind, generous, brilliant, incredible administrator, right? And you set up a dictatorship because he's the best dude, right? He's the best person for the job. You can give him all the power because he's the best man in the world. So who's next, right? If you say, if I get 10,000 signatures on this, I can get someone fired from a university for saying the wrong thing. Not even 10,000, 2,000. This has happened, right?
It's awful.
Yeah.
I don't like what this person has said. I can have them fired. If I get enough support, I can have them run out of town. I can
ruin their life.
I can ruin.
Cancelled.
I can ruin at the very least their professional life. And then you go, okay, I'm going to establish this as a precedent. So is it that anyone now, if they can get 2,000 signatures, can get anyone fired from any
Pretty
job?
much. Yeah.
Is that the world you want?
I know.
Because then you have to be absolutely sure that the future is going to be full of people who have exactly the same moral certainties as you do.
And the problem at the moment with the left is that, no group of people is cannibalizing themselves quicker than the far left. It is the race to see who can be the wokest, and it becomes this ever kind of finer and finer definition and box of what is the ultimate woke fucking prince or princess or non-gender binary, blah, blah, blah. I
did this podcast with Lisa Sharon Harper, who's one of the heads of the kind of Charlottesville Black Lives Matter whole thing. She's an incredible lady. But she was saying it's much better to think of progress as being walking together towards a light that's in the distance, because then it doesn't matter how far away you are from the light as long as you're facing in the right direction. And opposing that to the idea of this walled garden, right? You're either in or you're out.
Yeah.
And then not just a walled garden, but a walled garden where the walls change regularly. That's fascism.
Well, that's what disturbs me about what's going on the left. It does have the stench of kind of more fascistic ideals. It really does. You don't believe what I believe, so your life. Where's the social justice in destroying someone's entire life because they made a clumsy error of judgment or a statement?
I think left and right are no longer useful ways of articulating.
Well, I don't think that the left and the right as they currently exist are even bear any similarity to what those terms originate. It's like how people, Trump is the king of the conservative movement. What?
Yeah.
This philandering porn star fucking disgusting creature is your ideal?
Yeah.
King Herod or whatever they think he is, that he's going to usher in the fucking global apocalypse and send them all to heaven. It's insanity. But it's just...
Did you hear that they've proven that the King Herod thing didn't happen? There was no census.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so these Jewish sort of archaeologists and stuff, there was no census at that time. What they had to do was to get Jesus of Nazareth to Bethlehem, which was King David's city, so that you could say that he was of the line of David.
See, context is important.
Context is important.
Back writing the story. I feel like he's the Messiah. I feel like he's the King of the Jews, so we have to figure out how to make that.
Yeah, I worry, and I worry a lot with, what's happening in America at the moment. Like, everyone's talking with so much surety that, of course Trump's going to get voted out in 2020, but they're talking the same way they did in 2016. And I remember in 2015 saying Trump is definitely going to win and people howling with laughter at me. And then I don't understand how after all of these precedent-breaking examples, you can still have so much arrogance and so much like, oh yeah, of course. I think he's going to win. I don't think he's going anywhere because I think the left are going to cannibalize themselves over the next year and a half. The Democrats are all going to, point out why that guy's a fucking traitor and that guy's fucking morally bankrupt. And he will just, that's what he wants. He wants all of these, nothing empowers the right more than the left just eating each other over just nonsense miscommunications or just slight differences of opinion. It's if we at our core fundamental believe that everyone is equal and that we shouldn't be an arsehole to each other, well, we can work out the details through good conversation. Isn't it enough to
I think like the art of debate and conversation and, well, not conversation so much, but debate is kind of gone.
Well, there's no room to consider anymore. I mean, you send a face...
You send
a Facebook message to someone and it's immediately time-stamped that they've seen it. So even if you want to, I fucking hate it. Even if you want to sit there and consider your response for a second, there's this anxiety of the tick-tock, tick-tock. They know I've seen it. They're probably sitting there. It's, you know what I mean? What if you've, someone sent me an email the other day and it was a pretty heavy email and I had to send them a teaser trailer email for the email that I'm going to send just to let them know
that you've seen
it's been received. I just need some time to think.
Yeah, I need a minute.
And I will give you a proper response in a couple of days when I've had time to sit here rather than just hot take send. It's just, there's no room for nuance anymore. It's awful.
Maybe it'll swing back the other way.
Maybe.
Probably
I don't think it will.
Might.
But unless everyone unplugs from the internet, I don't see how it's going to happen because it's an unprecedented landscape we're in now where everyone is just racing to be the... Have you seen those YouTube videos where people will race to be the first person to comment on the... It's first to comment. And like, oh, wow. What an achievement. I don't understand. It's just this weird kind of like... I don't know. And we've never been in more need of nuance. The world is in a state.
I think when you were saying, I'm skipping back and forth because I'm debating myself in my head this podcast. But when you were saying you are concerned about doing gigs, are you editing yourself on stage?
I mean, I did some gigs on the weekend and I felt very free, but I think I only felt free because it was 11 o'clock at night and
everyone was drunk.
Everyone was wasted and it was like, yeah, woo, I'll say whatever I want. But at a gig like at 8 o'clock at night when I can't fully see everyone in the audience, I found I'm pulling my punches and it's out of fear of being, and maybe I'm conflating the issue. But I've had a couple of gigs. I've had a couple of gigs in the last couple of years where people have started screaming at me in the audience, like accusing me of being a racist or accusing me of being a sexist. And it's like, what I said wasn't even racist or sexist. It was like, I don't know what, and it's that kind of thing where it's like, well, first of all, this is no forum for a debate. I'm headlining and I have to do a fucking show because I want to get paid. But second of all, even if there was that room for debate, there is none. It's just this just barrage of, no, you are this, you are that. And I don't know how to navigate it.
So you are editing when you get up. Okay.
I edit myself when I'm editing myself in this conversation because
Yeah.
I'm aware that it's going on the internet and I hate it because I've never lived my life like that ever.
Yeah.
And in the last couple of years, it's like, oh, better not say that.
Do you think it's feeding into this stuff?
Probably.
Like everybody
Yeah,
editing
probably. I mean,
themselves
a lot of comics have told me that it's all in my head and I need to get over it.
No,
I don't think it's all in your head at all.
I don't think it's all in your head
No.
at all. And I think there are a lot of people who are saying this kind of thing that we are saying to themselves and at the same
Fuck yeah.
time piling in on online.
I've had people say that to me. What? Like that they've argued a point against me all night, and then at the end told me no, they actually do agree with me.
Oh,
but,
yeah,
But they couldn't be seen
but
to
they
be
don't. They
agreeing.
can't be seen to agree with. It's like, what the fuck? Like, this is how. Like, I know this is taking it to the nth degree, but this is how fucking genocides happen.
Yeah.
You know what? You don't have the courage. It is.
I know, I'm laughing because Ben always ends it by saying that they'll tell everyone.
Yeah,
that
I was
he's
yelling at
under
a guy the other day.
floorboards.
You're the guy that says he's down there under the floorboards. He's down there. Just don't hurt me, you fucking coward. But it's true. Like, if you can't, in this very safe environment with me, who like I don't give a shit, you can't say to me,
But
"Oh
it's
yeah,
not
actually
for
I'm
you,
on."
it's for the other people.
It's for the it's this
that
performance.
they're
Everyone's
concerned
performing, and it's
someone will say-
exhausting.
But then even the
that they
people
said
who are
something
arguing,
wrong.
even the people who are arguing for rationality, like, you know, these people who've been dubbed the intellectual dark web, the Sam Harrises. And look, a lot of them have really good points, but they are being as reactive as anyone else. For example, again, please bear with me on this, the amount of time they spend arguing about trans issues, but on both left and right,
Yeah.
and in this like allegedly middle ground, totally rational scientific one, you realize you're talking about less than 1% of the population. This is a human-to-human it should never be in the news. It's a human-to-human
exactly.
issue.
Yeah.
It might have something to do with legislation, but it's not.
It's not the
Ben
issue
and I
that
have
everyone
discussed this.
Like
It
I
is
have
less than
friends who don't
1%.
talk to their parents because they disagree about trans rights when neither the friends nor the parents have trans friends.
We know people whose friends are transitioning, and the friends think that maybe it's a phase
Or a mistake.
and they will not tell their dear friend, "Hey man, can we just have a conversation? I just want to check in with you
Yeah.
and make sure you're okay," because they're afraid of being labeled transphobic. And it's like, well, now you've crossed over into this threshold where you're concerned about your friend. And maybe the concern is bullshit. Maybe you're wrong. But if your dear friend, if Jen
But
came
if
to
you
me and
can't
said, "Oh,
open-
actually, I identify as a man and I'm going to get a sex change tomorrow," I would feel it incumbent upon myself as her friend of over a decade to go, "I fully support you, but before you do something that's completely irreversible, are you 100% sure? Are you 100% okay?"
Yeah.
Why is that suddenly a fucking...
who are close to people, so it's kind of scary. Yeah.
You know, but it's this reactive fear of being labelled, you know, a bigot or whatever. It's unbelievable.
Also, as the kind of someone with a legal background, I've been thinking about this. I read an article probably years ago, so I can't cite it to you properly, which I think is another problem in society. We're not doing proper citation. But this argument for bodily autonomy is a much better long-term legal basis for trans rights than the narrative rhetoric.
What does that mean?
So, like, when it comes to, for example, okay, gay rights is a really good example. A very powerful, persuasive, rhetorical argument is the "I was born this way" argument. I was born this way. If you were born the way I am, you would be in my shoes. You have to understand it in that way. A much better argument is I can put my dick wherever I want. You can't tell me where to put my dick. Because what if tomorrow they come out with a pill that, quote unquote, cures homosexuality?
Yeah.
We don't know what causes it. We don't know the science of it. We don't know if it's a different brain shape, if it's a hormonal thing, if it's a socialized thing. We don't know what causes some people to be attracted to women and other people to be attracted to men. We don't know. But you're making an argument saying, I know, I was born this way. Just, you were a baby. Obviously, you weren't born this way. You don't have a sexuality as a baby.
Yeah.
You're a baby, so you weren't born this way. That's not even a true statement. It's just a persuasive one. When it comes to trans rights, you're saying, there's a very traditional narrative that you see. From a very young age, I knew I was in the wrong body. As I hit puberty, it became life-threateningly upsetting to be confronted with the body not matching my sense of what it was, right? You don't even need to start talking about that. You can just say, I'm allowed to do what the fuck I want with my body.
Yeah.
And as a legal basis, that is much better because we don't understand the science of what it is to be trans. You have so many authorities disagreeing with one another for either scientific or ideological reasons or both. Why even open that can of worms? Why not just go, it's none of your business. I'll chop my fucking arm off if I want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
it's much clearer.
You
It's
don't
much
need
easier
someone
to
to
digest.
accept or celebrate you. You need them to allow you legal rights and autonomy over your own body.
Yeah.
And that's something that, you know, all of those, even older people who are not kind of acclimatized to these ideas could theoretically get on board with, because it becomes a freedom issue and it becomes a just get on with your life issue. It's not a political issue.
You go to my grandfather, who's dead now, but he was outraged when seatbelt laws came in. Don't tell me what to do in my fucking car. You can go to him and say, the baddies in the movies are the ones that ask to see your papers. Why do you care what gender they have on their birth certificate?
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, okay, cool. That is a conversation that you can have. But again, why even does it need to be a conversation? It's a personal thing. It's an individual choice that you have with your friends or your acquaintances or the person at your work who's come in for the first time in a dress. You go, oh, hey, what's happened here? You have a conversation, you go about your business as
man.
people.
Yeah.
Why are people so angry and upset about it?
Well, again, I think a lot of it is, people just, scoring fucking points. Look how progressive I am. Look how and I think that's what I blanch against a lot with a lot of the kind of left wing stuff is, is that what you really in your core believe, or are you just virtue signaling? Like the male feminist. I'm a feminist, and it's like, cool, man. Like, stop telling me you're a feminist. Your behavior and your actions should just reflect the fact that you're not a sexist pig.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't, it's a very strange kind of...
I also know plenty of feminists who are horrendous people.
Yeah, fuck yeah. Of course, again, as you said earlier, it comes down to an individual human thing, and individuals of any persuasion can be fucking assholes. And I think a lot of the arguments that come out where, there's a lot of infantilizing that happens as well.
Bigotry of low expectations.
Exactly right. This person couldn't be a predator because they're from this minority group. Well, fucking... every group is capable of producing predators or genius great people. I
am basing this on one conversation I had with someone who identifies themselves as a very left-leaning feminist, who's like every positive label you can chuck on that they have. And they're starting to realize that the labels mean nothing. Because in their words, they were like, I went on a date with someone who, and I felt so fucking old, but they were like, oh, he identifies as A, B, C, D, E, F, which ticks all the boxes, which to me I thought was so funny because, like, I've never dated a person where in the first 2 minutes they're like, hey, Jen, do you want a drink? I'm a feminist. Like, it's weird for me to relate to that at all. However, they said that basically after, like, 3 dates, 4 dates, they discovered it was all bullshit and it was all just labels and it all meant nothing. So part of me does have faith that it could swing the other way where enough people will have enough experiences where they'll be like, yeah, they said that, but they do this. I do.
I hope so.
So
it doesn't necessarily mean it'll be positive, but I hope that
for example, my dad says he is not a feminist. I'm not a feminist, he says, despite the fact that I was brought up with a twin brother and we were given absolutely equal opportunities, except that if I went to a party, I had to call them before I went home so that they knew that I was coming home. That was the only inequality growing up. I was educated, I was encouraged. There were sort of traditional gender roles in my family because my mum was sick, and so my dad did the looking after her. But he asked her for her opinion. He respected her feelings. He gave her every respect that any human being gives to another. There was no sense that she was less than he was. He was brought up by a single mother. He protected all of the women in his company. His second in command was a woman. He never treated anyone of any race or gender any differently in his day-to-day life. He just says, I'm not a feminist.
Label.
I don't believe that whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
For him, that's saying, I don't believe Jermaine Greer, basically, because that's his old school thing of like, or, he marched for gay rights, but he was like, well, I don't feel like I'm an activist. It's like, I just don't think people should be beaten up for who they are.
No, because it's a given. And I think that's the difference between people that are a little bit older that have life experience and have met a lot of people and done a lot of things, and that you get to a place where you're just like, are you an asshole or you're a cool dude?
Are you a good person?
And if you're a cool person, all the other stuff is superfluous. It might be of minor interest here or there, but really I'm kind of indifferent to it. I don't really care. If you're a dickhead, well, you're just a dickhead, and it doesn't really matter what
shape you came in.
And it seems a lot of the kind of like, oh, how dare you, is coming from people in their early 20s. And my theory is, when you're in your early 20s, you're assimilating a lot of new ideas, you're assimilating a lot of different ways of life that you're not necessarily comfortable with, or you don't have a lot of experience with. And maybe there's a voice in your head going, oh, that kind of makes me feel weird. But instead of reckoning with that in your own self, you project it outwards and accuse everyone else of being intolerant or this or that. The number of times I've been, gotten into an argument, not an argument, but whatever, a back and forth with someone in their early 20s who's telling me, that I'm either this or that. And it's like, you have no idea what my life experience is. You have no idea who my friends are, who my family is. Like, I'm 15 years older than you. And I've had a whole, life before you were even out of primary school.
Well, there was a guy who was talking to a group of trans activists, and he was using the term transsexual, which was the term that was in vogue in the 90s when discussing these issues. And some of the students walked out, and in the break, some of them came up and said, how dare you use that term? And he went, oh, I am trans. I've been living as a man since the early 80s.
Yeah, when you got your head fucking kicked in for it.
Yeah.
When it wasn't celebrated in memes.
But it is a little bit that of like, you don't really know who you're talking to unless you're dealing with them as a person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's telling the comedian who's my size, who's on stage saying whatever the hell I want, that I'm not a feminist.
Yeah.
It's like, well, really? Then what am I?
Yeah. We're certainly at least first wave feminists.
I mean,
because we're doing the job as well or better than most men.
Oh, I thank you.
I just don't know why men think they're funny.
It's weird, isn't it?
They're more suited for physical labour.
Well, not me. I never had a dad to teach me how to lift. Alice, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming and having me. I came. I'm so tired.
I feel like when
Thank
you're
you for
back
having me.
in Sydney, you need to come back, because I brewed and argued in my head so much throughout that I feel like I want to talk about so much more.
No. Like,
Next time
will you come again?
Yes, I will. I will absolutely come again, and you guys should come on my podcast.
Definitely.
Which is Tea with Alice, where I have difficult conversations with interesting people.
Oh, that sounds fucking great.
It's awesome.
Where else can people find you on the internet?
AliceFraser.com is your kind of central point. I'll be doing the Sydney Comedy Festival this week from the 16th to the 19th at the M More, but that's basically sold out, so... Eat a dick.
Thank you, Alice Fraser.
Thank you, Alice.